Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very important lesson on important clauses in the Constitution. My name is Miss Jennifer Blank. There I am. Now, this is very serious, so I want you to pay attention, and here we go. So the first clause we're going to talk about is the full faith and credit clause. All right, the Constitution states that every state must recognize the laws and legal proceedings of other states. This is what is meant by full faith and credit. Okay, so it's very important. Basically, all the contracts, any legal rulings, all these things transfer from one state to another. And this is a very important change from the Articles of Confederation because under that system, the states could pretty much do whatever they wanted. So there was a lot of miscommunication, misunderstandings, and a lot of confusion because if you did one thing in New Jersey, you go to Connecticut and do something else. So it was very confusing and it caused a problem. So for the Constitution, our founders wanted to make sure that something was in there that mandated, that made sure that every state honored the contracts of other states. The necessary and proper clause is really, really important. It's also, in many cases, known as the elastic clause, which you see this icon down there. And what that clause states is this: to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. Basically, what this clause is saying is that Congress has specific enumerated powers, what things that it's specifically supposed to do, like declare war or regulate interstate commerce, regulate economic interactions between the states, right? So, according to this clause, Congress can make any laws that it needs to in order to carry out those duties. So, and this gave rise to this idea called the doctrine of implied powers. And what that has allowed Congress to do is regulate matters of the national economy, like making national regulations, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Clean Air and Water Act. Things like that were deemed necessary and proper to regulating interstate commerce. And this has allowed the federal government or the national government to have a very expanded authority in a lot of different areas of life. The Supremacy Clause is so important because it basically means that all laws made by the federal government are supreme to those of the states. So if a state makes a law that's in conflict with the federal law will win. But let me read you the actual text. The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made, under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. Anything in the Constitution or the laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. And like I said, this means that the federal government's laws take precedence. They are more important. They are supreme to those of the states. If a conflict happens between a state law and a federal law, the federal law is going to win. The Privileges and Immunities Clause was part of the 14th Amendment, and that was, as I hope everyone knows, a Reconstruction Amendment. It was passed in the aftermath of the Civil War, and it states that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States. Now, this was designed to protect former slaves, but what it's also done is allowed the federal government to get involved in matters of the states through this thing called incorporation doctrine or selective incorporation. And what that means is that the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, apply to the states as well. So the states are not allowed to abridge, the immunities or privileges of the United States. They're not allowed to do anything that messes with the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. Now, originally, the founders argued that the Bill of Rights only applied to the national government, and a lot of the states thought this was great. All right, so the Bill of Rights applies to the national government only. That's what it was supposed to limit. But with the addition of the 14th Amendment, now the Bill of Rights apply to state governments. So if states try to infringe upon our freedom of speech or freedom of religion, the Supreme Court has the power to come in and stop them. What they are doing is now unconstitutional. Okay, the Commerce Clause is very important. Congress has the power to regulate commerce or economic activity with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. All right, it's also known as the Interstate Commerce Clause, and what this allows the national government to do is to regulate economic activity that involves the entire country. A big part of this was coining money. Under the Articles of Confederation, all states were basically allowed to do whatever they wanted with currency, and this caused massive, massive problems. So now, according to this clause, the national government has the authority to create a currency and to monitor and regulate that currency, among other things. So this is basically the federal government having the power to regulate economic activity that involves national stuff. The Establishment Clause is really, really important. Our founders were students of history. They saw what happened when church and state were mixed. They saw bad things happen, entire collapses of nations, massive civil wars. It was an epic disaster. And they were very, very clear about separating religion and the government, because they saw the bad things that happened because of it. And that's what the Establishment Clause does. If you draw your attention to this graphic down here, the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And Thomas Jefferson, over in this graphic right here, erecting the wall of separation between church and state is absolutely essential in a free society. Now, one thing that kind of drives me crazy when people talk about the Establishment Clause, it's not just freedom of religion, it's also freedom from. Okay? If people who are in power are allowed to push their religious beliefs onto others, then this prevents people from having freedom of religion. Because eventually, somebody who is not your religion is going to come into power. And then, once those people are in power, you are no longer going to have freedom from religion. Once you open Pandora's box, that thing is open, and you can't close it. So our founders were very clear. Freedom from, but also freedom of. Okay, both of those things are very, very important. The Equal Protection Clause is also very key, and it's from the 14th Amendment, which, as we know, was a Reconstruction Amendment, so we should pay attention to that. That's very important. And it states that no, and we talked about this earlier, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. This means that no matter who you are or what you are, whether you're a citizen or not, whether you're male or female, whether you're black or white or Asian or Indian or black and white polka dotted, whatever you are entitled to equal protection. So the laws that apply to some must apply to all. This was designed to protect former slaves, but it now protects all of us. There was this case called Plessy v. Ferguson, which put into play this idea called separate but equal doctrine. And that was segregation. That was separating white students from everyone else. And in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, a really amazing thing happened. The Supreme Court said that segregation was unconstitutional based on the 14th Amendment, based on the equal protection of the laws. And now, this is why we can all have class together. This is why we are understanding each other better, and we are no longer separate in that way. It's because of that Supreme Court case, and it's because of this amendment. But one thing I do want to draw your attention to, this clause guarantees equality of opportunity, not equality of condition. Okay, so it's important to keep that in mind. You have equality of opportunity. What you choose to do with that opportunity is up to you. Okay, it's not the government's job or anybody else's job to make your life perfect. It is the government's job to make sure that you are protected under the law. So that's an important point to note. So what did we learn? Well, we learned about the full faith and credit clause, the idea that states have to honor each other's contracts. We learned about the necessary and proper clause, which allowed us to have, allowed the federal government to have implied powers, the idea that they can make additional laws that are necessary to carry out their duties. We learned about the Supremacy Clause and how the laws of the federal government are supreme to those of the states. We learned about the 14th Amendment with both of these guys, the Equal Protection and the Privileges and Immunities Clause, and how this amendment was a Reconstruction Amendment, and it was designed to protect all people, to make sure that all people are protected under the law equally, and that states cannot interfere with our basic rights, that the Bill of Rights also applies to the states. We learned about the Commerce Clause, and that gives Congress and the national government generally a lot of authority to regulate the economy, such as making currency and coining money, things of that nature. And we also learned about the Establishment Clause, that we have freedom from and freedom of religion. I hope you learned what you need to, and I will see you in the next video.